and we are back for the Season 8, Episode 4 Serious Q&A. Once Cersei decided unequivocally to declare war by beheading Missandei, what possible reason would she have for not first launching a barrage of arrows at the complete senior leadership arrayed in front of her, especially Tyrion, who she had a lordship contract on for most of the series and is close enough to have a conversation in normal tones? Well, if I were to apologize for the scene, I would say that perspectives can be odd with cameras, and that we can assume that Dany and her guards were well out of range of the archers and the ballistas. Yes, it's a contradiction, as it seems they were close enough to hear Missandei, but let's assume that Dracarys was actually just for Tyrion's ears and would be relayed to Dany, or it was to taunt Cersei, who might have had some High Valyrian training in her youth. Now, why Tyrion was spared is a different issue. He is definitely in the range of archers, and Cersei chooses not to kill him both before the death of Missandei and after. And yes, Cersei has long wanted him dead, but this was when she thought he had killed Joffrey. However, she did send Bronn off to kill Tyrion, so it does seem that she actually wants him dead. So what gives? Why didn't Cersei kill Tyrion either before or after the death of Missandei? Well, a few things could be going on here. It may be that Qyburn lied about Cersei's wishes and he personally sent Bronn off, and Tyrion figured the whole thing out. Or it could be that Cersei knew Bronn would fail and was trying to send a message to Jaime and Tyrion also figured that out. However, both of these explanations seem a little complicated and nuanced for the show. The simplest explanation is that there's a big difference between hiring someone to murder someone in the abstract and personally ordering the death of someone in front of you. Tyrion is still Cersei's brother, and although Cersei is completely nuts and can be massively cruel, she still may be incapable of murdering her own flesh and blood herself face to face. And it seems that Tyrion, a man who knows Cersei's second best in the world, was banking on this. So what happened between Sansa and Ramsay in their bedroom is common knowledge now? Who ran their mouth? Ramsay, who is trying to give the North the impression everything is cool? Theon? Bran? Well, although it seems like castles are free of help and deserted in Game of Thrones, or that pub last episode, Sansa would definitely have had servants other than Theon during her time as Ramsay's bride. They would have seen her ripped clothing, seen her bruises, heard her screams. And people were definitely aware of the abuses against Jane Poole in the book. And it's pretty well established, at least in the book, that servants gossip. Not to mention there's characters like Maester Wolkan walking about. So the rumor was likely about, but that only explains half of the story. You see, the rumor would be at Winterfell, but the Hound wasn't at Winterfell until very recently. Additionally, it's a bit odd that the Hound only has half of the story. He heard about the abuse, but not about Ramsay being fed to a dog. Someone had to clean up that mess in the dungeons, and they would certainly gossip as well. Why didn't the Hound know about that? I mean, technically it's possible that the Hound arrived at Winterfell and overheard castle gossip at a meal about the abuse but not about the murder, but it's a bit odd. So are there any other possibilities that could explain things? Well, the problem with the Hound learning about anything is that he has only a handful of friends, and I use the term friend loosely. He has essentially the men he went on the White Quest with, people like Jorah, Jon, and Beric, but none of these men seem like they would gossip. And then there's Gendry, someone we actually see the Hound having a meal with. And Gendry does have a direct source to information about Sansa, Arya. And one would think that if Arya is going to tell a story about Sansa, her family, she would want to put Sansa in a favorable light. So perhaps she would tell of the abuses of Ramsay, but might leave out the parts that make Sansa look bad, like feeding another human being to a dog. It's not a perfect explanation, as Gendry and Arya don't even seem to talk very much, but the one-sided nature of the information makes Gendry the likely source. How did Euron and Cersei know that Missandei had any value? Isn't she essentially just a handmaiden and translator? So quite a bit has been made of Euron's capture of Missandei and his failure to capture more valuable assets like Tyrion or Grey Worm. And this is actually something I don't have too much of a problem with. So first off, it's pretty well established that the way you get to Dragonstone in the show is by skiff. And that means in the show, Dragonstone has no deep water port. If Euron's ships get too close to the beach, they'll hit bottom and damage their hulls. So in order to capture the survivors who are making it to the beach, the Ironborn would have to get in their own skiffs, which might take some time. Additionally, close to the beach, Dany might have some archer protection, making the trip hazardous. We're given little information on what Dany left behind on Dragonstone. Perhaps there was some protection. Now, some people think it's a little weird that Missandei in a skiff is captured and not the people swimming. Shouldn't a boat be faster? Well, we just have too many unknowns. We last see Missandei when she is told to go to the skiff, but we have no idea if she actually made it. And how long does it take to lower a skiff into the water? Did she have any help? Did she have any oars? We have no idea. For all we know, she never made it, fell into the water, and wasn't a strong swimmer. She might have been simply grabbing onto a wooden plank for dear life, trapped on one side of the ship as everyone else abandoned ship on the other side. Or maybe she was pinned by some wreckage or panicked, and we have no idea about wind conditions and currents. Like I said, too many unknowns. Now on Missandei's importance. Dany did bring only 4 individuals to the Dragon Pit besides her Dothraki guards: Tyrion, Varys, Jorah, and Missandei. Cersei must have assumed she was an important advisor, as no translation services were needed. Not to mention, Euron could have interrogated her and found out that she was one of Dany's most trusted advisors, with Dany for many years. I don't think it would be too difficult to figure out she was important. A minor complaint, but shouldn't have Gendry knelt in front of Emilia Clarke after being legitimized? Or at least utter, "Thank you, Your Grace," instead of just standing there looking dumb? Well, I will say, in the books, kneeling is kind of important, and it's a rather interesting subject. So with regard to kneeling, there does seem to be 3 different types of interactions going on: greeting and approaching a monarch, submission to a monarch, and being honored by a monarch. So let's talk about greeting and approaching a monarch. At least in the book, this is rather widespread. When you approach or meet a king or queen, you kneel. When prisoners are brought before Robb, they're forced to kneel. When Walder Frey meets Robb, he says he knows he should kneel, but claims his knees won't let him. When Cat meets Renly, Brienne commands her to kneel. When Jorah comes before Dany, he usually kneels. Every time people come before Stannis or Selyse at the Wall, they kneel. And of course, in both book and show, everyone kneels when Robert arrives up north, and this is something I complained about in my review of Season 8, Episode 1. When a monarch arrives, whether it be Jon or Dany or both, kneeling should have happened, especially when you're trying to parallel a previous scene. Now there is of course the exception of the King Beyond the Wall. No one kneels to him, and no one ever kneeled to Viserys, and the Dothraki are a bit inconsistent on when they kneel. The most interesting culture, though, is probably the Ironborn. We never see anyone kneel before the Ironborn king, though people do bow their head in respect. This is peculiar, as the Ironborn do talk about kneeling when they speak of homage and submission. Now, we do occasionally see individuals get away with not kneeling when everyone else does. Family members of the king, Melisandre, and weirdly, Ilyn Payne. For some reason, he gets away with not kneeling. I guess if he's a manifestation of death, it makes sense metaphorically. Now, with regards to submission, things are a bit more consistent with kneeling. When Dany exits the pyre, everyone kneels. When Robb is crowned king in the north, everyone kneels to him. This is true in both book and show. After the Blackwater, people kneel and submit to Joffrey. When the Wildlings come through the wall, they kneel to Stannis. When Arianna kidnaps Myrcella to make her queen, her gang all kneels to Myrcella. The big exception is again the Ironborn. When they crown Euron, they don't kneel, but instead put him up on their shoulders. Again, this is interesting, as the Ironborn speak of homage in terms of bending the knee, but in actual practice, they don't do it. That said, when Theon takes Winterfell, he wants people to bend the knee, and when Asha meets Stannis, she bends the knee, though these are more complicated intercultural exchanges. Oddly, in the show, when the North makes Jon their king, they don't kneel for him as they did for Robb, despite the scene's intention of mirroring the previous scene. However, later when Alys Karstark and Ned Umber submit to Jon, they do kneel. Finally, there's kneeling when you're honored by a monarch. This again is pretty consistent. When Ned is made hand, he kneels. When Davos is made a lord, he kneels. When Stannis speaks of making Jon Lord of Winterfell, he speaks of Jon kneeling. When Littlefinger is made Lord of Harrenhal, he kneels. And again, the weird notable exception to all this is the Ironborn. When Euron makes several men lords, they merely stand there, kind of like Gendry. So yes, when Gendry was called before Dany, he should have knelt as he was approaching a queen. He does give a slight nod and calls her Your Grace, but that's about it. Additionally, as he was being honored, he should have knelt as well, unless he thought Dany was from the Iron Isles. Now, it may be that the show is attempting to portray the North as more informal. Last season there was a joke about Dany having many titles, but Jon only being king in the North. But this is simply not the case when we look at early seasons or the book. There's plenty of ceremony. We can think of the ceremony that Ned takes before beheading Will, or the ceremony given to Robb Stark when he became king in the North. Additionally, if we examine scenes with Cersei, the ceremony is largely gone as well. Neither Euron nor Harry Strickland kneel when they approach Cersei. In fact, no one even kneels at Cersei's coronation, which is pretty crazy. The showrunners turned Sansa into Littlefinger 2.0, and they think that's a good thing. Do you agree? I guess that's what they're going for with Sansa, as Sansa specifically says she learned a bunch from Littlefinger. But I also fail to see how Sansa is actually a new version of him. So Littlefinger is a bit different in the book than he is in the show. In the book, he's everyone's friend and no one suspects he's a master schemer. And in the show, he's a loathed snake that everyone suspects is a master schemer. But the scheming for his own self-gain is the consistent part. Now, what has Sansa done that's been sneaky? Well, I will say that she seemingly lied to Jon about the need to save Rickon, only to reveal later that she thought Rickon was a goner. That could be seen as sneaky. And she hid the Vale forces from Jon, allowing the Northern forces to be killed, only to be saved by the Vale. That could also be seen as sneaky. But I don't think that's what the show is going for, as they pushed the whole Stark love narrative, and Sansa didn't really benefit from the Vale specifically saving anyone. Everyone just sort of forgot that the political landscape should be Vale dominated. So what else did she do? Well, Sansa did order Brienne away, thinking that Brienne might try to side with Arya during their Season 7 dispute. Although it was a bit schemy, it wasn't very clever. No, Sansa was being dumb and being manipulated by Littlefinger. So has Sansa done anything else? Well, in Season 8, Sansa's actually acted as the exact opposite of Littlefinger. She's been very blunt and open about her problems with Dany. There is no scheme, no duplicitousness, no master plan. She simply doesn't like Dany and wants everyone, including Dany, to know it. The only thing that she's done that resembles Littlefinger at all is letting Tyrion know about Jon's parentage. This does seem like some sort of scheme, a parallel to Littlefinger letting Ned know about Joffrey's parentage. However, there is a large problem with this parallel. Littlefinger was pinning people against each other for his own self-gain. He didn't care about Ned, Robert, or the Lannisters. They could have died for all he cared. He wanted to rise in their chaos. Are we supposed to believe that Sansa doesn't care about the fate of Tyrion, or Jon, or anyone else? That kind of goes against the crypt scene where she and Tyrion had a moment in episode 3, and it goes against all of the Stark love stuff. And how does Sansa really gain from Dany's death? She's still just Lady of Winterfell. When it comes down to it, Sansa cannot be a Littlefinger and a loyal Stark who cares about people at the same time. They're mutually exclusive. And that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.